All right, is everybody in? Perfect. Thanks, Caleb. Welcome, everybody. It's been a few months now since we've had one of our fireside chats. So happy to be back and thrilled to have Christine Halef with us today. You'll hear sort of lots of interesting stuff. This is, as I think all of you guys probably know, this is our fourth in a series of fireside chats hosted by Mount St. Vincent's Department of Business and Tourism. It's really just to engage community, the business and tourism sector with our students. So it's been really successful to date. We're excited to continue as we're into 2021, which hopefully will be a better year. And we'll have some more announcements coming out shortly on the next speakers. So with that said, please join me in welcoming Christine today. Christine and I are friends. We go back a few years, and it's been kind of an interesting story, sort of watching and sort of seeing how she's built her business. And Christine, as she'll tell you, is a pharmacist by trade and is now sort of a guru in the cannabis space, and has sort of had that big transition into business from pharmacy. So the story is really kind of a unique one and a really interesting one. So Christine's a fantastic person, fantastic business leader, a big proponent, obviously, of Nova Scotia business. So that said, please welcome Christine. And sort of hosting Christine today and asking questions is Megan Cook, who is a student within the Department of Business, who's had a big year in her academic career and has done a great job sort of helping me out with some of these sessions. So Megan, thanks very much. All that said, I will sort of fade away in the background, and maybe Christine, maybe you can kind of kick it off just by telling a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. My name is Christine Halef. I'm the president of Atlantican Medical. Very honored to be here with you guys. Just basically, just to touch upon what Jeff said, I'm by trade a pharmacist. I graduated pharmacy at the Dow College of Pharmacy in 2007 and worked as a pharmacist for about 10 years before this new business opened. So in the midst of that, I started, my pursuit of figuring out what I really wanted to do with a family of entrepreneurs. I knew that I didn't want to just kind of work in a community pharmacy setting for forever. And I decided to explore the opportunity at the time in 2013 when commercial cannabis applications were approved by the PC government at the time. And I decided to submit an application, and, fast forward 5 years, we have a facility opened. We cultivate, process, package cannabis, and we are currently selling it in 5 provinces: Nova Scotia, Ontario, BC, New Brunswick, and Saskatchewan. And it's definitely been a life changer. I feel like I've done a 180. So it's been a long process, but it's been very fruitful to see the transition from looking at plans and regulations and applications for 5 years and to having almost 120 employees. So it's been a whirlwind.
That's really interesting, Christine. I'm really excited to be here with you today. So that was my first question. Thank you so much for giving me the background. The second question is, how important do you feel that your pharmacy background is in your business? And has this background elevated you within the industry that you're in?
I think it has. I think for the experience that I've had in pharmacy, you go from learning very traditional pharmacy to when you do experience, and everyone has a different experience, but in my community pharmacy settings, what I saw was a movement towards natural products. People wanted to explore that more, and you just saw every year an increase in requests. And, that's not what necessarily we're taught. We're taught very traditional medicine. So it helped really expand my, depth of knowledge and really open my eyes to alternative and more natural methods to treat many conditions. And I think the biggest impact that I would say my pharmacy career had was, at one point I was working at a pharmacy that was next to a pain clinic. And it was difficult to see how many opioid prescriptions I was dispensing, and really the impact that had on the patients' lives, regular people like me and you. professionals that slowly and surely started to become very dependent on these opioids. And it was a tough thing to really, see, because we saw the transition, day in and day out with these opioid prescriptions, and the increase in usage. So I would definitely say that affected my curiosity and my interest in the use of cannabis for medical conditions. And I also believe it did give me a different perspective. So I'm not just coming in here in a business that's, how do I make a quick buck? I definitely had a longer picture and really a vision. And that's what I wanted. I really wanted to marry the opportunity of being an entrepreneur and building something with also my interest in the health profession.
Exactly. And compassion wise, that's huge. I think that that's an amazing transformation into another industry, but yet kind of giving the same kind of aid. So that's really, really interesting. So were you always passionate about cannabis, or was it really just that exposure during your pharmacy years that changed that for you?
It was definitely my exposure in the pharmacy years. I think I grew up just like a lot of us during my generation. It was faux pas. I mean, we did it and it wasn't legal, and but definitely the passion was developed later in life.
For sure. And it's cool how experiences can kind of, shift your direction in life. I think that that's really interesting as well. So was there a particular point where you knew that you had to make a difference? Like, was there a specific example you could give us, or a day that you can explain to us that really set in your mind that you were going to be an entrepreneur?
I don't think I can pinpoint it to one day. I think the influence that my family has on me is significant. My dad immigrated to Canada like 40 years ago now. And he really worked hard and didn't, English was his, not even a language. So I can't even say it was a second language, and he became an engineer and put himself through school, while my mother worked in a tailor shop. And then they worked hard, and he really built his legacy. And I think the hard work and the dedication and the impact that he has had on my life is significant. And so it's driven me to always want to do more. And that really is what I think has led me to this. And he always says, no risk, no reward. And that was the one thing that really resonated with me, because I wasn't a risk taker. I'm a pharmacist. We're not risk takers at all. So being able to, what was risky for me was moving away from, a field that I studied. This isn't a business degree. This is a very highly specific degree that you really can only do one thing with, right? So to go and kind of put that on the back burner, and focus on something else, I didn't want to fail. And I think his constant advice was no risk, no reward. And it really did, manifest itself. So it was a risk, but, it rewarded itself. And so I think that really is what pushed me.
Good for you. That's an interesting answer. I like that. And it's great to see people around you succeed and kind of, pick up on things that they've done and it's worked. So that's great. Has it been challenging to be a woman in the cannabis sector? What was the biggest challenge there? I do know that might be a little bit intimidating. So I definitely am interested in the answer of this.
Gosh, was it ever? I mean, first of all, I think even in the construction and the planning of the facility, I was constantly the only woman in any meeting. And you do feel at points, insecure. I think you feel like maybe you have to have a louder voice because, you don't want people to underestimate you. And I think women in many different fields struggle with that. And even in daily life, I think we're given a reputation that we have to be louder to be heard. And it's unfortunate that sometimes that's the case. And, sometimes when you're a little more, stricter or, when you are a woman and you're a little more abrasive, let's say, they, rather than them, saying, wow, like what a shrewd businesswoman, they're like, wow, like, it's always turned into something negative.
Yeah.
So it certainly was difficult. And in many times, like I had to overcome insecurities of me being in constantly rooms full of men. men that have been in, very high professional positions, men that felt like they knew what they were doing. And I think women do bring a different, apt and a different aura, and not, I think what women bring, and I said this one time in a room full of men when I was actually pitching the sale of our company, was what women bring is an open-mindedness, because I think without that level of pride, you're open to what other people are suggesting. Yeah, you're right. I don't know that. Please enlighten me. Would love to learn more. I think it's a different level, and not going to paint every man the same, but that was the feeling I had, and it was a struggle. So it still is. Like, it's 2021, and I really feel women still have that, uphill battle.
I completely agree. It's almost a harsh tone that you have to break through in order to kind of gain that respect. And it sucks to say that in 2021, but I've definitely experienced that as well. Is there anything within those situations, any powerful advice that you'd give to other women in, standing their ground and kind of moving forward in a business sense?
I mean, I think that's it. I think it's normal to second guess yourself, but try not to do it in front of anyone else. And I would say really just being, holding your conviction and feeling like it is okay to be uncomfortable, because this is the situation that you're presented with, right? You're not going to change the world. One person isn't going to change the world. Hopefully over time, things will look different. But I think you have to have your own conviction, and no matter what is said or what is alluded to, I think just staying strong and holding your conviction is important. I mean, I remember at one point after a meeting, I was labeled a ball buster. And, I was like, God, if a man did that, they would be labeled completely differently. So it was, but rather than dwelling on it, I knew in my my heart that what I did was right and my conviction was correct. So I think being confident, trying to be confident, really understanding where you're coming from. It doesn't matter what the people in that meeting think. What matters is what you really believe in.
Exactly. Thank you. I really like that answer. So kind of going away from that, we're going to touch a bit on the ownership structure here. How has that helped or made things more challenging for you?
Certainly shared ownership has its struggles. So we initially sold 50% of the company to a group, a US operator that managed several cannabis facilities in Denver, Colorado. And what that brought was another level of expertise. So one of their top growers moved from Colorado and manages our facility, and that has been a huge asset. So after that, we then sold an additional 40% to the Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq First Nations. And to me, that partnership has really meant a lot. A lot of investors look at different opportunities in either short or long-term perspectives. And what they did was they really looked at this opportunity, which not a lot of investors in the cannabis industry did, was as a long-term investment opportunity, something that will help with the growth of their communities and provide different economic opportunities. And typically in this industry, what we've seen is people liking to cash in, cash out very quickly. So having a partner that has a long-term vision, wanting to build a brand, caring about the employees, that has been, really, really fulfilling.
Great. I was actually going to touch on the partner aspect there. Never having a partner before, that must have been a bit intimidating, hey, to just kind of put your trust in someone else. Was there anything about that experience that you learned from in choosing a partner, or did you just kind of have them come to you and go through the interview process per se?
I think it was opportunity. I think what happened really was the stars aligned, because there was a point where I considered taking this company public, because it was funded with family money. So, that, of course, the motive is to always de-risk your investment. And when your investment isn't shared amongst millions of shareholders and it's relying in, family funding, then you want to de-risk your investment. So what we did, at the time, an acquaintance had introduced me to this group in the US called MRD. And that was their expertise in running cannabis facilities was really important for us because of course we have great expertise in building, right? And we had already gotten consultants and to help us with building something that caters to a cannabis facility in the way that we were growing, but having that expertise did help. So that was really important at the time and really had benefited us.
Great, great. So because it is kind of a family business in that sense, what were the different expectations in the sense of your success? So you were in pharmacy, you were in that field, and then you moved and did something like this. I would assume there's expectations and responsibility put on you. So how does that feel when your family is completely involved?
It was a lot of pressure. It's really what kept me up at night because the last thing I wanted to do, I have a successful older brother. So the last thing I wanted to do was be the one that squandered the family money on an investment that was risky. So I had a lot to lose. And I think that's what drove me. The passion, yes, but the consequence, right? The consequence of not being successful and having to face that, right? I mean, it was a lot of pressure when you're, using your own family's money and hard-earned money at that to fund something that could just blow up in your face. So it was a lot of pressure. And there's a standard that you feel like you have to fulfill when you have a very successful family, a successful father, a successful brother, and then all of a sudden, being the female in the family and, doing something that's completely outside of our comfort zone too. So, we're in real estate, residential and commercial real estate development. That's not cannabis. It's like far. So even for them to have that comfort to really for my father to have funded this project, he put a lot of faith in me, not the project, but in me, because this was completely outside the comfort zone of, our family business.
I think it's interesting because your situation is unique, and a lot of other times, people are trying to branch out from their family and make something out of themselves. So it's interesting how the pressure is the same, but yet a little bit different in that way. So next question is going to be, has Nova Scotia been a supportive environment for this business? And I kind of touched on this before, but were you studying the market before and after cannabis was legal? And how did that impact your decision on opening this?
So yes, I mean, what we studied in the market has definitely not presented itself as what we originally assumed. And I think that's been the case in point for the entire cannabis industry. So there would have been no forecasting of this, and you could use data. I mean, we've looked at Colorado and, being a more mature cannabis industry and based, but it's different. This is national, it's highly regulated, which completely changes it. We have a very, very mature legacy market here. So it hasn't come without its challenges. For Nova Scotia in particular, currently, when I think of our retail partners, so Nova Scotia being one of our retail partners with the NSLC, mm-hmm. They've been extremely supportive of local producers. So that I can honestly say they've been the easiest operator to deal with, the easiest province to deal with, and also super supportive of local producers. So in that sense, it's been great. The one thing that I would say is a challenge is that cannabis is still under that umbrella of, that stereotype of just kind of the illegal industry, even though it's legal. So getting funding from Nova Scotia programs, grant programs, funding programs has been very difficult because cannabis is still not, cannabis is actually a criteria of exclusion, not inclusion. So it's tough because that's kind of where I've had some challenges is that, we're an Indigenous owned, Nova Scotian producers creating hundreds of jobs in the province, female led, and just because we're cannabis, we don't, fit in the criteria of a lot of these funding programs. So that would be the biggest challenge I think that we're seeing right now with Nova Scotia.
Okay, that's interesting. So based on that, would you ever expand to different parts? And as well as that, I wanted to touch, is there any forecasting on, when this will kind of even out per se? Or is it just whenever
The
they feel like
industry.
it? Yeah, exactly.
They're saying 2021 is going to be a consolidation year, possibly 2022. 2021 is going to be a year where I think if you've struggled, you're probably hanging on after COVID. And so we've already seen two pretty well-known cannabis companies file for bankruptcy. So I think we're going to see that happen. And then I think what's going to happen is, near the end of this year and into next year, you're going to see some consolidation happening because there is it's a very competitive industry,
Mhm.
and there is a lot of players in the field right now. And a lot of them have spent a lot of money on capex, on just space, on just production area. And it's not manifesting itself into sales because of the glut and the excess inventory. So definitely we're going to see some consolidation happening.
It's too bad. So how important is the head grower in your business? And does this kind of act like as a competitive advantage at all? Is there anything you can touch on that would be part of that?
I think our head grower here, which we call him the director of operations, but he is definitely integral to the success that we've had. And I think it comes from his experience in Colorado in the commercial cannabis field for over a decade. It's one thing when you have grown, cannabis in your basement for 10 years, but it's another thing when you're applying this on a commercial scale. And what he has is that experience. So he's really been able to guide us, for many different things. And, essentially just knowing the business and the cultivation aspects inside and out has been a huge asset for us. And I think that was our struggle before we met MR Dean, was trying to find someone we felt had that capacity of commercial grow experience. And that's what he brought to us.
That's great. It's really good to have, yeah, expertise in your field. So how important is brand in your mind for cannabis?
I think right now it's everything because there's a lot of competition on the market. So this is what we're realizing. What we did when we first went out on the market was let's spend all our money on making sure our operations are at a certain standard. The product will speak for itself, right? If we put our emphasis rather than having, 10 executives, let's put our money into operations. Let's focus on making sure that we're putting the best quality product out there. And that really did help. We went out there and we literally did no marketing. So we went out there and with our symbol on our jar, and as you can probably tell, all the jars look almost exactly the same because of all the Health Canada regulations. But we went out there and we just said, let's try that first, because we really wanted to be frugal with the spending. And that really worked. People really resonated with the brand. I think between Reddit and Instagram, they've done a lot of our marketing for us. Now we're feeling there is more competition in the industry. And so we're putting an emphasis in building a brand. And for us, our brand, is really evident. We're a privately owned, East Coast business, Indigenous owned. We care about quality, and, we're not out there trying to increase a share price. So that's kind of the brand we're really trying, to push and to have resonate with the users out there. So, it's definitely a challenge because you can't do a lot of marketing, and so you try to be creative.
And word of mouth is pretty much, in my mind, just as good as a poster, if not better, because you have that experience to relate it to. So how difficult is it to get into the market of cannabis space? I know you said there's a lot of competition. So what was the biggest challenge, and are you still feeling that challenge today?
I would say the licensing process was the biggest challenge. I mean, I don't know any industry where you have to invest that much money before you even know you're going to be allowed to operate, right? So, cannabis industry, cannabis companies were spending millions and millions of dollars before even knowing if Health Canada was going to approve their application. And that licensing process itself is years. So you're spending so much overhead, so much into construction and processes, and you don't even have the faintest idea when you're going to get licensed. That is the hardest thing, entry into the market. And even now, like there's some provinces that do a very extensive licensing process themselves just to be able to sell into the province, even though you're Health Canada licensed. So I would say that that's the biggest challenge. And really working within the confines of the regulations is difficult, really, because again, this is a business, right? You have operating expenses, you want to be profitable, but it really does hinder that when you're, forced to comply with some regulations that don't really make sense, but you have to do it, and it's costly. The cost of doing business in the cannabis industry is very high.
That's interesting. I definitely wouldn't expect that. So I learned something new. What are the main markets within cannabis, and how do you differentiate your product? I know you said the label and stuff like that, but is there anything else like grow wise that you can talk about?
Yeah. So what we feel differentiates our product from others is that we have a lot of added value to our processes. So we grow hydroponically in Rockwool, so it's a very clean method of cultivation. And then we had custom chambers, drying room chambers built from Conviron, which allow us to hang dry the product rather than rack dry. And this just allows for an even and uniform drying method. And then we hand trim, which is a huge thing. Machine trimming beats up the product. We have 50 trimmers here who hand trim that product every day, that added touch. And then we also hand package. So again, this is all keeping kind of an eye on the quality of product that you're putting out there. So with hand trimming and then your hand packaging to make sure the jar has great appeal, all of these processes are what we implement to ensure that the end consumer is happy with the quality. So it does cost more money, but our hope is that it continues to resonate with consumers that do want that premium quality.
Exactly. And long term, it makes people feel better about the product. So that's really cool. What made you decide to sell part of your business, and why not all of it?
So as I mentioned before, de-risking the investment was one of my huge priorities. So having had funding, you're not in the industry when everyone was, starting to have applications and stuff. The banks were not funding this. It was cannabis. They were not touching this with a 10-foot pole. So everyone had to get private funding. I was lucky enough that my family could fund it. But at the same time, it being the risk, my selling it and being able to pay back that investment, right, was one of my priorities, which is, why I sold most of it. And then to keep 10%, I mean, for me, it's still my baby. I always call it my third child because it actually is. It sometimes wakes me up at 3 a.m. So it's important for me because I've worked so hard over the last 8 years on this project, and I really didn't want to let it all go.
I feel like I'd be the same way, so I can really appreciate that. Thank you for answering that. Could you walk us through a typical day of your life now and the commitments and meetings, and what does it look like from start to finish?
Typical day in my life. I mean, I come to the facility, my office is upstairs, so our entire grow operations is downstairs. I'm very hands-on, and I'm actually trying to get away from doing all of the nitty-gritty. So, I'll answer my emails. I deal with all the provinces, so all the ordering, the purchase ordering, that goes through me. I deal with the licensing, so any regulatory, reports and requirements that we have to fulfill, I handle all that. And, of course, if things come up, which they do, this is a manufacturing plant that, will have equipment issues, or, something will come up, with a barcode issue or something like that. It comes straight to me. I have an open door policy at work. So it gets opened a lot. So I'm very hands-on, and I even respond to, Instagram messages because I like to see what, the feedback is. And that info@atlantican.com email goes straight to me. So I'm constantly kind of juggling all different aspects, whether it's business development, consumer engagement, and then, our retail customers. I have my hand on many different areas. And I think when it's like I said, your baby, you have a hard time letting go of certain things. And I think that's what has happened here.
For sure, for sure. So that being said, how has this affected your family life? What are some of the positive things that's come from it, and negatively? How many hours do you typically work in a day?
Um, God, there's really no start and end time, and I think that the problem is the phone, right? It's there, it's the email. I'm constantly engaged. I work pretty long hours. I mean, I'm here in the morning. I try to get home around supper, and then after supper, my kids go to bed. I try to go back and I tackle whatever is still I feel needs to be addressed. It definitely, as a woman, I think, and as a mother, it's that challenge of balance, and I haven't found it yet, unfortunately. I try as much as I can to make, the most out of the weekends. And it's hard, I think. And I think one thing that resonated with my child the other day was I spend more time at school with my teacher and my friends than I do with you. And I think what I try to, explain to my kids is that it's important to have a passion, and it's important to have a purpose in life. And what I'm hoping is that, they see the work ethic, and that drives them just like it drove me when I used to see, my family working. I hope it drives them to be just as ambitious. And I mean, I'm trying to get over the guilt, but it's a balance. Finding the balance is hard with a business like this.
For sure. And I think as they get older, obviously, you kind of understand what your parents are doing, and you understand the sacrifices. So I think that, yeah, they'll be able to learn and appreciate that. So it's hard. It's a hard balance for sure. What motivates you to help others? And was there a moment, I know I mentioned this before, that you knew that obviously opiates, that was a moment where you knew that you needed to kind of make a change. Was that the only time that you felt that way?
I think all through my pharmacy career, it's really been a progression of just like, okay, this isn't a job, right? This is more than that. People are looking for a solution. They want this. So, at my last pharmacy job, I do relief shifts at the fertility clinic, which is again just, an eye opener, because it really does. People are struggling, and they need answers, and they need help, and they're looking to you for that. And to provide options for people is, I think, the driving factor for me, because through my progression of my pharmacy career, again, I went from very traditional medicine to all of a sudden I'm in a compounding pharmacy, and we're creating bioidentical hormones for patients because traditional hormones and synthetic hormones did not work for them and affected their lives. Cannabis is another opportunity. There's so much unknown about cannabis and the benefits on top of what it is known. And people, whether it's PTSD, epilepsy, pain, this is an option that needs more research, but it's out there for people, and it's a very safe option. And I think providing that opportunity, we're in 2021, like we need to open our minds and be able to explore different methods of treatment. And this is what drove me to this industry. And I think I'm excited to see what the next step is in the research that comes out of cannabis.
I am too. I really think that this is going to catch on. Unfortunately, I feel like it's been too long already, but hopefully in the years to come, it definitely catches on. So what is your advice to aspiring entrepreneurs, especially since you've gone from kind of a traditional route to a non-traditional, I guess, socially? What would be your biggest word of advice for everyone else out there?
No risk, no reward.
I like how simple that is. No risk, no reward. That's great.
Megan, sorry, can I jump into the question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I just obviously.
Oh, your mic's off, Jeff.
Sorry, there we go. Just building on what Megan just asked. And I think you've had a bit of a different journey with your family being entrepreneurs, but like, would you characterize yourself as sort of being born as an entrepreneur, or that's just something that you sort of embraced over time, or was it more kind of opportunistic in terms of, hey, there's an opportunity here, I'm going to make the plunge? Like, how do you think about that? Is it something that you're kind of born with?
No, I never had that. I would say growing up, I was always more traditional in my pursuit of education. At first I was going to be a doctor, and then, I decided, no, I don't want to do that many years. So let me be a pharmacist, because I was always interested in the health professions. The influence of my family, I think, was huge. And I think what happened was it really came at a point in my life where I was struggling personally. And this was my outlet. So in my personal life, I was struggling, and this gave me a purpose. It gave me an outlet. It gave me something to work towards that was mine. Right. And that was, I think that, so for me, no, I wasn't born with it. And I think, there's a much deeper story behind, what motivated me to go down this route. And so, between the influence of my family and the personal struggles I was going through at the time, that would be, what really drove me.
Got it. Yeah, I always find that interesting, and that's always. And I've had this debate with many entrepreneurs, right? And the other, and I'm going to jump in one more time, Megan. Sorry. The other question I had, which is again kind of building on that. Now you are an entrepreneur, and I've always often heard people say, "Oh, well, this business is my baby," and sometimes you sell it, sometimes you don't, et cetera. But ultimately, that's kind of the common theme, and I've felt that in the past as well. And so now that you've done it and you've got maybe that entrepreneurial bug, like when this sort of thing comes to an end for you, whatever that looks like, do you see yourself kind of jumping into another venture? Or, I mean, probably too early to tell, but it's always interesting to hear entrepreneurs' perspectives on that, because I work with many who, have had big exits, have done really well, have been really successful, who in some cases are older, and you just assume that they'd want to kick back with their feet up, but then they jump into two or three more ventures. So just curious on your thoughts.
I definitely am open to that. I think, my family being in real estate, and now my husband as well, doesn't entice me as much. So if another opportunity came my way, I definitely would be interested. I think, this has been and fulfilled despite the hardships and despite how much time and effort I put into it. It's also been so fulfilling. And I just wouldn't change a thing about even all the hardships that I had to go through. So yeah, I would definitely be open to something. I mean, everybody wants to retire early and kick up my feet. I definitely want to work on my golf game. But I definitely would not say no to an opportunity.
Got it. Okay. Sorry, Megan.
No, that's okay, Jeff. I'm not sure if we have any student questions that came through. I'm pretty much wrapped up here on my end. Not sure.
We'll give it a sec. So just for everyone's benefit, and I didn't do a great job in the introduction and the onset, just to avoid some of the unfortunate things that have happened on Zoom over the last few months, we've got everybody sort of locked down. So if everybody should have the ability to type a chat, which will go through to Kayla, I believe, and then we'll pass the questions along. So if you do have any questions, it's a bit clunky and a bit less efficient, but that's how, unfortunately, in this day and age, we have to do these things. So we'll give it a second and see if anybody comes in with any questions.
So I guess, Christine, just to kind of keep the conversation moving here, I know you'd mentioned if there was an opportunity, you would take it. Would that be just kind of where your passion lies? I know it's hard to say since it needs to present itself, but would you ever move within like the cannabis sector into something else, or do you have a passion for anything else that you can see yourself making a business out of?
I mean, I think what this has taught me is anything is possible, any industry, any, opportunity. I don't think anyone would have thought about this as being a business opportunity 10 years ago here. So it would be anything that would interest me. I think at this point, if it was something that I was intrigued in, whether it was a passion or not, or whether I thought it would be a good investment opportunity as well, then I would consider it.
That's great. And you have all the expertise now, which is great as well.
Well, I wouldn't say all the expertise.
You're learning. That's great.
You're learning fast. Christine, just one question as it relates, and I'm familiar with the cannabis space, but not overly. Is it, would you sort of characterize it as being fairly friendly amongst the different like LPs and producers, or is it, kind of cutthroat? Like it's kind of still, I'd say, a pretty early stage industry. So I find in that environment, it can go kind of one of two ways. Either everybody's friendly and collaborating, or everybody's completely sort of cards to the chest and nobody wants to speak to one another. So how's your experience been in the cannabis space, and what are your thoughts?
It's cards to the chest.
Yeah.
It's highly competitive. I mean, there's been points where we've like refused tours to people associated with other LPs just because, or times where, if you're looking at the same vendor for something, they won't give up references because no one will give a reference. So sorry. So it's like that, so we have difficulty verifying a vendor because no one wants to be a reference. So
Yeah.
It's cutthroat for sure.
Fair enough, which makes it kind of interesting in some ways, right?
It's understandable. Like it's a highly competitive industry right now. So I get it.
Yeah, fair enough. We do have one question in from a student. Just wondering sort of if you were to explain how you were able to sort of carve out a competitive advantage in the industry, what would you attribute that to?
I would say two things. The value add that we add to our processes. So we built a purpose-built facility, and we did a pretty good job building it, not to toot our own horns, but we're really able to hone in on like growing a clean product that does not need to be irradiated. And obviously with the hand trimming and the hang drying, that is a differentiator for us. I think also the indigenous ownership is the second differentiator for us. Having people want to support a company that they stand behind. That's not just watching a ticker, on the stock exchange. So I think that also is a differentiator for us.
Good answer. So that actually pretty much wraps us up pretty well right on time, quarter two. So any other questions before we let Christine get back to her hectic day? All right. Well, I think with that, maybe we'll wrap up. Christine, thanks so much. I mean, this was awesome. I think we've got 40 some odd students here, and I think each one of these they learn a lot. But I think learning and hearing from somebody who is in Halifax, has kind of gone into a new industry and done some really cool things is there's a lot of benefit to students in that. So I can't thank you enough. Appreciate your time. And Megan, great job. Thanks for co-hosting. Everyone who joined in today, thank you for jumping in. Lunchtime on a post-snow day is probably pretty crazy for people. So appreciate it. Thanks for continuing to support the Fireside Chat series. We will have some announcements in the coming, probably maybe days, but probably weeks on the next couple speakers. So appreciate everybody's time. And Christine, thanks again.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
After.
Thanks so much, Christine.
Okay. Thanks, guys.